Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. My name's Jay Kroesen, the editor of the Missouri Times, and this week we've got a great opinion maker panel for you. Justice Horn, thank you so much for joining us from Jackson County.
Thank you for having me.
Representative Kent Strickler from Lee Summit.
Glad to be here.
Dan, the can-do man, Dan Houx, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
And Representative Rodger Reedy from the nearby Benton County, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today.
Of course. Now, obviously, we just got done with special session a couple weeks ago, and not too many people were very optimistic about Governor Kehoe's chances of getting the stadium bill across. It's obviously not a great vote to take, as Jim Murphy said on the floor, but it is an important one for the state's economic future. Representative Reedy, what were your thoughts kind of going into special session?
Well, going into this, of course, we had the three different areas that we worked on, the storm damage thing out of St. Louis,
Yep.
and also some projects that was in the original House Bill 19 that didn't make it through. But I like to call what a lot of people call the stadium bill, I like to call it the economic development plan.
Yeah.
What district would not, if they were going to lose two big businesses in their district, wouldn't do everything they could to keep those businesses there? And you know, this was something that was really important for the west side of the state.
Yep.
And I consider myself a Westerner here. And so I felt like going in now that we would get them passed. I had confidence that the governor and the work that he had done on it, that it would pass. In fact, you know, I went on at Wednesday that we voted because I didn't need to be there for the rest of it, and things went like I thought they would, but I was glad to see it pass. And
the real question seemed to be is not will Governor Kehoe get it done, but how much will it take for him to have to spend to get it done? And obviously you saw the increase for the St. Louis storm damage in there as well, and some increases in that HB 19 funding. But I mean, is it really a good idea to doubt Governor Kehoe's ability to get things across the line?
Yeah. You know, I just think he's a very effective governor. He's doing a great job. He has a good rapport with the legislators because, and that's one of the things I think that made it successful.
Yeah. Representative Houx, obviously this is not a vote anybody would want to take. And being in the chamber, would you have really wanted to take this vote if you were there?
Yeah, I took a lot of hard votes while I was up there.
Yeah.
This would have been a no-brainer to me, just because the economic plan that it is, the buy-in that both the owners for the Royals and Chiefs have to have in order to get this funding back. I believe it's a true tax break bill, which is a very Republican stance, which you know, was kind of shocking to me of how many Republicans didn't vote for it, because you know that we're always looking for tax breaks, whether it's property tax, income tax, whatever you want to say, it's a tax break.
I mean, Johnson County also would have had some interest in seeing this pass because there was for some time some rumors that the Royals could have gone to Johnson County. So I mean, that would have been a huge economic boon for the area as well. I mean,
unfortunately, I think you're talking about the other side of the line, Johnson County, Kansas.
Had it gone bad, it could have been that other Johnson County. But
that's true. The worst Johnson County, as I like to call it.
Representative Strickler, obviously going into this, being from Lee Summit, the Jackson County area, you wanted to see something happen for this, especially for our side of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think the governor did a good job. I didn't know if he would be able to thread that needle, and I think he did a good job. And I think the part that I felt best about is it really is a good deal for the citizens of Missouri. It's a fiscally responsible bill. It takes the sales tax that is coming right out of those stadiums currently, and it allows that same money, which would just walk across the state line to Kansas, and says, let's, instead of having it leave Kansas, let's apply that to the stadium, which I think is responsible. And yeah, I was pleased to see it get through, and you know, pleased to see it get through in a way that I think helps all Missouri.
Yeah, obviously if Scott Faughn was sitting in this chair, he would kind of take a few pot shots at the Royals, but I mean, us being on the west side of the state, it is important that we do have two stadiums over here for our economy.
Yeah, absolutely, and they do, both of them provide money to the state. And yes, I'm sure Scott would have made some comments about 1985, but you know, gosh, it's been 40 years now, you know. So
Justice, sitting on the outside, did you think this would be an easy vote for Democrats on the west side of the state to take? What, as an outsider from that building, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was an easy vote for lawmakers, and you know, I think as the average resident watched it, you know, knew that this was going to get done. You know, my biggest concern, and a lot of the residents' concern, is why the state continues to step in and be honestly the adult in the room, whether it is property tax crisis locally to electing an assessor to even saving the Kansas City Royals and the Chiefs. These were long negotiations, and a deal should have been done locally, but the state had to step up to ensure that the Royals and the stadium stayed in Jackson County. And as it was stated before, the governor and the legislature stepped in to save these stadiums. So my concern is, local government should have got this done. They weren't. But the state, ensured that there was 2 deals on the table, both Kansas and Missouri, so that we can compete and ensure these stadiums could stay in Jackson County, Missouri.
Representative, obviously, St. Louis side of the state, would this have been an easier vote for those people if there was some more money in there for the tornado damages, or was there already, I think, a suitable amount?
Well, I think I think the governor listened to compared to his first proposal, with which was originally just the $25 million. And I think in talking with folks in the Senate, talking with the folks from St. Louis, the $100 million, I think, was a good amount. And I know I appreciated him listening to that side of the state.
Because ultimately, that's a big deal for a lot of your caucus.
Oh, it's a huge deal, and people are still suffering. That's one of the things that I think sometimes. If you're not in that area, you don't realize, and we on the Kansas City side don't realize, that's still going on. It's going to be going on for a long time there. So I was pleased with that. And again, I think that was, frankly, just good negotiating and good understanding of what was needed on the other side of the state.
Do you think the property tax addition to the amendment on the stadium, do you think that was kind of a sweetener to get Republicans? But, I mean, ultimately, what would your thoughts have been if you were in that chamber and that was brought on board?
Once again, we're always looking for a tax cut, whatever way possible, shape, form it is in. I just got my new reassessments here in Johnson County. Our assessor's done a great job and held our taxes low, but the state came in and said, you've got to raise them. Now, I look at that tax cut, surely going to be like to see it happen.
Yeah. Representative Reedy, a lot of Republicans had some difficulty kind of bringing themselves to vote for this, and I can understand that for a myriad of reasons. But at the end of the day, I mean, was that property tax reduction and freeze, was that kind of a good enough compromise to get some people over the line? Obviously, you have some interest in the stadiums being on the west side of the district, but I mean, looking at the Republican colleagues, kind of tell me what was the thought process on that?
It was kind of a mix on that. Some of them felt like they got left out, which some of the counties didn't do that. There was some of them due to the negotiations in the Senate and with their senators. They were not included that. Some counties were 0% counties, some were 5% counties. And so I think it probably helped in some cases, and in some cases it made people turn and vote against it.
Now, obviously, at the end of special session press conference, Speaker Patterson had some thoughts about wanting to maybe come back and do some more property tax issues, as well as some HB 19 issues. Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think they'll be able to sign on to that, or is that kind of just some ideas that he might have later on?
I think it will. He appointed an interim committee that we're going to start meeting in July.
Do you happen to know who that vice chair is on that committee?
I happen to know who the vice chair is, and I feel very honored that the speaker chose me to be the vice chair of that committee. I've talked to Representative Taylor, who is going to be the chairman, and talked to some members already about ideas, and I think we have a lot of opportunity to look at different things that we can do to help people with the tax situation. My friends from Jackson County, there's been a lot of spotlight put on them and what's going on there, but it's getting ready to happen in a lot of other counties with these raises this year that have been ordered by the tax commission. And I'm going to put a little plug in there. It's I was former assessor for 27 years, and it's not the assessors that wanted to do this. The tax commission was the ones behind saying you've got to raise these values. So I always say the assessors are doing what they have to do, and as the assessor right here in Johnson County has been a great friend of mine for years. He didn't run again, but he always took very good care of his constituents here in Johnson County, and was always very reasonable. And but we're going to see a lot of affect a lot of people this year.
Representative Houx, do you think they're going to be able to pull off a second special session before the 26th session?
Oh, there's definitely plenty of time if they want to do that. And going back to the sports teams real quick, I remember last summer talked to my good friend J.J. Rizzo, former Senator J.J. Rizzo, about the Royals and Chiefs, because he's
a big deal to him right now.
It's a big deal to him, a huge deal to him. And I said, well, what do you think? He goes, well, I'm just happy I'm not going to be in the building and have to vote on it. So, and that was early last summer around this time. He knew Jackson County probably wasn't going to be able to get it done, and they would have to go to the adult in the room.
Representative Strickler, do you think the addition of an HB 19 kind of side projects, would that be a sweetener for Democrats to come back for a special session? Do you think that would happen?
I think certainly there is interest in some of those projects that didn't get voted on with HB 19, and some of them made it into the bill, the stadium.
The Missouri reactor being a big one.
Yeah. That being a big one, and a mental health hospital in Kansas City being a huge one for our side
Barb
of the state.
Washington was a champion for that even during the budget debates.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I know there's other areas of the state that weren't a part of that. I'm also on the interim committee that Representative Reedy is going to be vice chair on. I'm glad we're having those discussions during the interim. It's not going to be an easy solve because the issues that Representative Reedy sees in his county, are very different than the ones we see in Jackson County. They're all big issues. They're just different issues. And so I think threading the needle on that one is going to be challenging, but I'm glad we're going to have those discussions. We need to have those discussions. Whether it's right now in Jackson County, I'm sure you're hearing some of the same thing. 2 years ago was horrible for residents. The assessments were wildly inflated. I'm hearing that as well from the business community this go around in 2025. So something does need to be discussed, and I'm looking forward to being a part of that. I don't think the solution will be easy. If it was easy, we'd have solved it in prior years. But we need to try to address it.
Justice, being an outsider, do you think they go back for a special session?
I think they have to. I think, if there's a special session for sports stadiums and, it's the name of saving the local economy, you have to go back for our residents. They are the backbone of our county. There's 700,000 residents who are hurting, and you assess every 2 years. So they may, have their head above water this time, but 2 years later, and as stated before, commercial property, I was at a West Bottoms neighborhood association meeting, and we have folks who are like, I'm done doing business, I'm selling my property, and that I'm going to leave Jackson County.
Yeah.
And we're bleeding out residents who don't want to do business in Jackson County. So I hope if we're going to be pro-business, we're pro-resident, and we're pro-small business, and we're going to also ensure that people have the aid they need.
Yeah. I'm going to be the odd man out. I don't think they go back. I think that definitely will lead into some discussion into the 26th session, but I don't think they're going to go back. I don't know if the Senate really wants to come back for a special session, but that's kind of the Senate's way of going about things. But we'll be right back, right after a word from our sponsors.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Missouri farmers have been doing what's best for their land for generations. After all, no one knows what it takes to feed and fuel a growing global population better than they do. So why are trial lawyers threatening Missouri farmers' best defense against weeds? Our farmers don't need to be controlled. They need to be supported. Keep glyphosate in our state. Show your support at TakeControlMissouri.com. Paid for by Modern Ag Alliance in support of Missouri farmers.
Missouri's childcare crisis is hurting our children, families, and even our economy. Currently, 78 Missouri counties are designated as childcare deserts, where the number of kids needing childcare exceeds the number of available options. Today, some Missouri families are spending more on childcare than housing. And Missouri's child care shortage costs our economy $1.35 billion every year. Missouri families and businesses deserve better. Learn more at mochampionofchildren.com.
Some politicians claim cockfighting is a proud tradition, but is it really something to be proud of? Cockfighting isn't just cruel to animals, it's cruel to humans. It's linked to organized criminal activity, illegal gambling, even drug trafficking. Leading law enforcement and Christian groups have spoken out and are urging a stop to the violence. But some politicians want to give cockfighters a pass. Keep cockfighting out of our state.
We have a severe weather alert to report here. The storm is also bringing the threat of damaging winds and large hail.
Here's the thing. When storms bear down, we step up.
Ready to begin?
You bet.
Our teams are always ready to keep your power strong. Ameren.com/poweron.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. Representative Reedy, obviously, towards the end of that last bit, we were talking about some tax issues. I think that taxes and schools are going to be the two big issues that come up here in the next few years for Missouri. But first, with taxes, obviously, you've got property tax assessments, especially in areas like Jackson County, that are going crazy in terms of the amounts they're asking for. You've got some areas where tax relief is direly needed, whether it's income tax or sales tax of any kind of nature. What do you think the House of Reps is going to do when the Republicans come back in? Do you think they're going to address taxes next session?
Oh, I think so. I think that's when they talk about schools, they're also going to have to talk about taxes. They kind of go hand in hand. And I believe that the school issues are going to continue to come. The school choice issues that we have. I will tell you that I've been a supporter of open enrollment for the last 2 or 3 years. Maybe there were some years before that I didn't support it in the House, but I've tried. I really wanted to see that get passed. I think it could help a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. I think that you take that old kid that just has trouble where he's at, new surroundings may change his world and his whole outlook, and or her. It could be him or her. And I've been a big supporter of that, and I've been disappointed that hasn't made it through the Senate. But I think we're going to see these school choice issues are going to come. Yeah. But also, when you look at the funding, how much of the funding is coming from the local taxes. And when you want to cut assessments and you want to cut personal property and you want to cut all these things, are you cutting the funding for those as well? So it's a pretty it's something not to take and move too quickly on. You got to take a good look at it and see what the whole outcome.
Obviously, former Senator Bill Eigel kind of was really championing that personal property tax cut. But when it comes to a lot of these rural counties, like areas that you represented and areas that Representative Houx formerly represented, it's a lot more of a complicated subject where those personal property taxes really do help to kind of fund key necessities in that community. I mean, do you think they'll come back and maybe push for maybe an income tax deduction of some kind? I know Governor Kehoe's been really working at trying to figure out kind of a timeline for there. Do you think they'll get that done next session?
Well, I first of all, I applaud Speaker Patterson for putting together this interim group. That's identifying an issue and listening to your caucus member and the members at whole saying, hey, we need to look at taxes as a whole. Biggest problem I see with taxes, when you open up that section of law, which is one of our largest sections of law, it's just overwhelming. So it's going to have to be a very defined look at it, or whatever comes out of that committee, in my opinion, and keep everybody within the guardrails of, hey, this is what we're going to do to, whether it's income or property tax or whatever it is, keep them in a definite tight guardrail to get that done. Yeah. And as you spoke about the rural areas, when we look at property tax, we have fire districts, we have ambulance districts that are different than the urban areas. Our schools and feeding all these, our libraries, all come from that property tax. Yeah.
Representative Strickler, obviously Jackson County residents are not unaccustomed to the issue of property taxes and personal property taxes to some extent, but property tax really has been a huge issue for us over the last few years. And one representative recounted to me that that property tax issues are kind of a bipartisan thing for Jackson County Republicans and Democrats. And we both agree we both cannot stand how it's currently set up. So do you think Democrats are going to work to get, especially Jackson County Democrats, are going to work to find some sort of solution to that?
Yeah, I will. I will be, because I knocked enough doors, and you're right. Whether I was talking to folks that were Democrat, Republican, independent, non-aligned, whatever, their real property taxes was an issue that they were concerned about in Jackson County. And
I can't imagine what it's like in Lee Summit with it being a very booming population center now.
Sure, yeah, and you know, I just door after door after door. It was without a doubt the #1 issue of any issue that I heard. So I definitely want to work on that. I am concerned beyond that in some of the other areas, just because of what we talked about before, the linkage to education, to the fire and ambulance districts. And I'm also concerned about what's happening nationally. You know, if Medicaid gets cut, that may not be a great time for us to look to reduce income taxes.
There's some talk that the president is looking at FEMA as well.
Yeah,
and that seemed to be a big issue this special session.
Sure, and definitely, and you know, Department of Education cuts as well that could impact our districts. So I am concerned about that, but I think in the realm of property taxes, there are things that we can do because with the Hancock Amendment, most of our districts are not taking a windfall from this. Hancock helps to bring those down, but at an individual level, if someone gets a 60% increase or an 80% increase, that person's going to be hurt, even if the districts aren't helped. So I think that's the opportunity for us that won't defund our schools or our ambulance or fire districts, but will bring more sanity to the property tax process, I think.
A lot of the debate that I've seen in the Jackson County area, and obviously with us three being from that area, is the elected assessor issue.
Yeah.
I've heard some people say it might not work because if they're elected, it might be a politicized position to where people will get very upset if they go up for what could be very genuine reasons, but they'll vote them out because they didn't like the fact. And I've also seen some people say that the current appointed system just does not work. I mean, what do you think would have to work there, Justice?
Well, I think, you know, just to be very frank, every single other county, even St. Louis County across the way, elects their assessor. And if Jackson County residents, no matter their political background, are calling for measures of accountability like that, they should have every right to elect their assessor. And, you know, that's not going to be the end-all be-all, where it's, you know, solving crime, any of these issues. There's not one policy that will solve the issue. I think that's where we start, you know, having an accountability measure where, you know, face the voters, they have to go out there and earn support. But I think when you look, you know, what are the biggest issues in Jackson County, as, you know, Representative Strickler said, it is property taxes. You know, those are the biggest crisis, and, you know, we're Democrats, so we should be, you know, pro tax because it offers public goods. But what we see is that the county is continuing to tax people down where they're suffocating, and they need to offer a public good of some sort, and people are being asked so much where they're like, what is this benefiting my life? And we've yet to see that. So people need relief right now.
Yes,
and you know, things are bad if, you know, we're calling for taxes to be cut.
Like I said, it's a bipartisan issue for Republicans and Democrats alike in Jackson County. Yes or no, do you think that we will be able to see some serious changes with an elected assessor?
I think yes. Yep.
Yes.
I'll ask a little bit of a different question for you guys. Yes or no, do you think that the Republicans and Governor Kehoe will be able to push for a plan to cut income tax this next session?
I think it's in the ballpark, and the Wilma being.
I mean, I wouldn't doubt Kehoe's ability to do anything at this point. But what about you?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll continue to work on that as well. You know, we also have to remember there's a certain sector of people that don't pay any income tax, so it's not going to affect them anyway. But for those people that are out there working every day, you know, their families are working hard, doing what they can, raising their kids. If we can do some cuts for them, we need to do that.
Well, just real quick, obviously we touched a little bit on education. I fully believe that educational freedom, or school choice, as a lot of people like to say, is an idea whose time has come. And I think the longer you kind of put that off, I think the more people are going to come around to the idea. Do you think the Republicans are going to be able to get something across for that this session? This upcoming session, I should say.
You know, I don't know. You know, just like I said, we've had open enrollment, and it's been there for several years.
Yep.
Representative Pollitt from Sedalia has worked so hard on that, worked with everybody that was interested and willing to listen to him, and he can't seem to get that done. So that kind of makes me think it's going to be really tough.
And it's a complicated issue for the Republicans. Obviously, suburban Republicans are a lot more interested in the idea because there's a lot more competing school districts they can have. But in areas like Ava, Missouri, you're not exactly going to have, you know, a charter school open up down there, or, you know, around here you're not exactly going to see a ton of schools pop up. Do you think they're going to get that done despite the complications in the caucus?
Well, you know, 2 years ago they had Senate Bill 787, if I remember correctly. It was the bill that had to do with a lot of pro-choice. And, you know, at the time I felt that it was finally, if something did happen with that bill, the next wave was even going to be more against public school. I've always been very public school. But in that same note, UCM used to sponsor 16 charter schools. They have none today. There's none in Johnson County. So, but I do believe that it is a subject that needs to be talked. Open enrollment needs to be brought back up. I think that between the two groups, there's probably a happy medium to be had.
Well, with a minute left, Representative Reedy, who won the week?
I'm going to say the Missouri Cattlemen's Association. They just had their all-breed show in Sedalia. Those young people got to come and show their livestock. And also along with that is the Cattleman Steak Fry, which is a big event. And they had a huge crowd and great speakers. And my hat's off to Shannon Cooper and Nancy Giddens, who works for those, for the Cattlemen's, because in the last few years we've seen them bring a bipartisanship of attendees. Many legislators from both sides of the aisle were there, and they've just done a great job of pulling together to promote the Cattlemen's Associations. So I think they won the week.
I heard Governor Kehoe had the biggest hat there, which I don't think is any shocker right there. Representative Houx, what did you think? Who won the week?
I would say Representative Chris Brown and Senator Curtis Gregory getting Senate Bill 3 signed.
Absolutely. Representative Strickler?
For me, I would say the First Amendment, peaceful assembly, peaceful protest. We saw in Lee Summit, we saw 700.
Another Lee Summit representative would have had a similar fiery answer.
She'd had a more fiery answer. But we saw 700 to 1,000 people out there. Beautiful, peaceful protest, just the way that we intended in the First Amendment.
Justice, who won the week?
I would say Kansas City Royals winning. That's always great,
We
especially
always
if we're
need a
talking
win.
stadiums. We need a winning team too.
Absolutely. I'm going to say the University of Central Missouri won the week. We are here currently in a different studio than normal, and I'm just eternally grateful, one, to be an alum of the University of Central Missouri and to be able to come back here with such a talented team to help film this episode of This Week in Missouri Politics. I hope you'll win the week by joining us on This Week in Missouri Politics next Sunday. Thank you so much.
This Week in Missouri Politics is sponsored by the Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, Ameren, Spire, the United Electric Cooperative, and the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts.